So they're going to pink slip all the teachers in Providence, Rhode Island. This is a place that spent $1.5 million on wind power. We'll get into that at some point. The Indiana teachers, Democrats are fleeing. The governor there, not all that upset about it. That'd be Mitch Daniels. Republican governor, not all that upset about it, that they're fleeing the state. Ohio is next. Madison, Wisconsin is still undercover. The media, by the way, the Wisconsin drive-bys know where the Wisconsin Democrats are. And now we do, too. We know where they are, but they were covering it up. They were right in a room with them. They were conducting press conferences. The Democrat senators from Wisconsin were. And the media tagline was from undisclosed location. Nothing undisclosed about it, from unreported location. Because these clowns knew where they were. So the journalists, the drive-bys in Wisconsin, have clearly chosen sides, which is no big surprise to anybody. And where are the polls? Ladies and gentlemen, from the AP, from CBS, ABC, Gallup, where are the polls about what's going on in Wisconsin? Isn't the media interested in who the public is supporting there? Or are they not able to get the results they want, even with all their oversampling and other skewing tactics? I mean, seriously, folks, if there were overwhelming support for the fleeing Democrat senators among Wisconsin residents, don't you think that we would be seeing this? But we're not seeing those polls. You can bet that Obama wouldn't have pulled back on his public support for these protesters in Wisconsin if the polls were not awfully bad for the unions. And Obama has pulled back. I got to thinking, but what if the Republicans in Washington had only fled the country when the Democrats were ramming their health care bill through Congress? Seems like a brilliant tactic. Now, Democrats would have never had a quorum, and we wouldn't be saddled with unconstitutional Obamacare. I myself, had I known that this was a possibility, I myself might have even paid their airfare to Barbados or a foreign destination of their choosing. But nobody thought of it. The Republicans didn't think of running away. They didn't think. They tried to stay there and fight this. They didn't flee the country. Anyway, the Democrat tactic opens up a whole new political tool. You can't say weapon anymore. So it opens up a whole new tool. When things aren't going your way, just scram. Flee the country if you're talking about Congress. Flee your state if you're talking about a state legislator. Hey, let me get this straight. Let me try to batten all of this down and make it understandable. All of Obama's talk about learning to live with less, about Americans using too much of the world's resources, Americans being overweight, all of that, apparently that only applies to taxpayers, not to public sector union members, not to federal bureaucrats, not to trial lawyers, not to Jesse Jackson. In other words, those who don't work for the government, or those who don't get anything from the government, they need to keep giving until it hurts and hurts, while those who take need to keep taking and taking. I think I pretty much have this understood now. Obama's out there. We got to learn to live within our means. No, we do. He doesn't, and the unions don't. The bureaucracy doesn't, but we do. The people paying for all of this, we're the ones that have to learn to live with less. We are the ones who have to sacrifice. We are the ones who have to live within our means. We are the ones who have to eat the twigs and the berries and all that stuff that Mooch Hell Obama demands that we eat, but they don't. They don't eat all that rot. They're out eating barbecued ribs. I don't care if they're short ribs, long ribs, or baby back ribs. They're out there eating ribs with all kinds of cilantro-flavored potatoes on the side. But not us. We're supposed to dial it back. This is what Obama means by sacrificing and spreading the wealth. The people that pay for everything dial it back. We do with less. so that what we are saving ends up being spread around to all these other people, the unions, the union leaders, trial lawyers, Jesse Jackson, federal bureaucrats. Now, while all this is going on, Obama continues to defy a federal judge in Florida, saying his Obamacare bill's unconstitutional. He's pressing ahead with Obamacare, continues to issue regulations that are tantamount to destroying our industries. He continues to obstruct offshore drilling for oil. What is the oil price now? $99. Oil price is $99, and Gaddafi is threatening to do a Saddam on his oil fields. Have you heard about this? Gaddafi's threatened to set his oil wells on fire. Gaddafi ordered his Air Force to conduct bombing missions on Iraqi or Libyan citizens, and they refused. They bailed out of there. At least a couple pilots did. So you've got all the instability in the Middle East here, particularly with the oil price now jumping. We could be looking at $5 a gallon gasoline. We're already at $4 a gallon in California. And yet, Obama continues to obstruct offshore drilling, continues to kneecap the private sector jobs. You can imagine if he had 1/10 the interest in private sector jobs that he does in union jobs. You realize that his focus on jobs is all about union jobs. We all know why. But imagine if he had that kind of jobs. Teachers unions, SEIU, the AFSME, all the rest, they deserve all they can get, all they can grab. They go for it. We pay for it. They go for it. They get all they can grab. They somehow are entitled. They somehow have been screwed over by this country all these years, and now it's their turn. Now that they're on the inside, they get their hands in the till. And the till better be full. We better keep making payments to it. It just so happens that a chunk of what all these unions are grabbing from the taxpayers somehow manages to wind up in the Democrat Party. At the end of the day, isn't that interesting? A chunk of what they grab from the taxpayers ends up in his and the Democrat Party's war chests. No wonder he wants union guys to work. They have to pay dues that end up in his war chest. No wonder he wants more union jobs. That's more union dues that end up in his war chest and the Democrat Party's war chest. So what does the redistribution of wealth? He's out there talking to Joe the plumber during the campaign. He wants to spread the wealth around. What does that mean? The redistribution of wealth means stealing from the taxpayers and giving to the Democrats, their favorite supporters. And as we told you at the time, that's what a large part of the stimulus bill was all about. It was a slush fund, taking money from taxpayers, funneling it through Obama's administration, sending it back to the teachers' unions, the SEIU, AFSME, public sector unions in the states, all to protect them from the recession. You realize now, folks, that's what the stimulus was about. It was about one thing: protecting Democrat donors from the recession. Making sure that Democrats, union, public sector, private sector, doesn't matter, all of these union people make sure at the government level, at state, federal, make sure they didn't lose their jobs. So that their union dues would continue to be paid, and those would end up in the coffers of the Obama war chest and the Democrat Party. The single purpose of the stimulus: make sure Obama's supporters kept their jobs. That simple. Meanwhile, we hear this nonsense about the right to collective bargaining with public sector unions. Even George Meany opposed it, the forerunner to John Sweeney. Even FDR opposed it. The right to collective bargaining, public sector unions, a collective bargaining against who? The people. You're not collectively bargaining against some cigar-chomping fat executive sitting in a boardroom in Detroit at General Motors or Ford or Chrysler. Collective bargaining against The taxpayer is what collective bargaining for public sector unions is all about. And FDR was smart enough to know that that would lead to people hating government. And if you're a Democrat and you want to tie up and cement power forever as being the party of government, you need people to love government. People end up hating government, getting mad at government, and you're the party of government, you and your party in heap big doo-doo. Little Indian lingo there. FDR knew this. George Meany, the early union guys knew this. That's why they said, no, you can't have collective bargaining. You can't even unionize public sector work. You can't even do it. Well, the current mob doesn't care. They don't care who you hate. They just as soon intimidate you into voting for them as opposed to making you love them. They don't care. And once they get their hands on the federal treasury, which they now have, they can make sure that their people don't lose jobs, don't lose pensions, don't lose health care during the recession, so that their donor money will continue to flow. Nonsense about this right to collective bargaining. Same president who ignores the will of the people. He wants collective bargaining. He wants these public sector workers to have fair treatment accorded them. He wants them to be heard. He wants them to be respected. He runs around and he says, they're our neighbors. And they are our friends at church. Blah, 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 blah. Fine and dandy. Sounds wonderful. Coming, however, from a president who ignores the will of the people. In this case, the people who pay for all of this largesse. The taxpayers of this country who are just now beginning to figure out their taxes are what is paying union dues that end up in the coffers of the Democrat Party. And yet those people ought to be thanked each and every day. The taxpayers of this country ought to be thanked. They ought to be shown appreciation. They ought to be given deals here and there. No, they are impugned, stupid idiots in flyover country. He ignores the will of the people. He ignores election results. He ignores federal court orders, thumbs his nose at the law and the rights of others, yet tells us that collective bargaining for government workers is some kind of enshrined human right. Really? Really? Then what about people who are forced to join unions when they don't want to? What about their rights? What about people who are members of unions but oppose their money being used to support liberal policies, politicians in the Democrat Party? What about their rights? What about the public that has to pay the bills for these massive unfunded liabilities, the pensions and the health care benefits? What are their rights? You see, my friends, it's not about rights. He can talk about the right to collectively bargain. He can talk about an enshrined human right union people have, blah, blah, blah. It's not about rights. It's about politics and power. And for too long, Obama and his party have used government unions, so-called collective bargaining, and the power to confiscate through taxation to build an unholy alliance against we the people. The Democrat Party and their holy alliance with unions equals an unholy alliance against we the people. Shared sacrifice? Shared sacrifice, right, Barack? Spread the wealth. Yeah, right, Barack? Yeah, tax everybody except your buddies. They're the beneficiaries of all the taxation. Transform America? Right, Barack. Grow the government? Yeah, right. Grow the government. Where's that happening? All in the name of the people. The same people are repulsed by all of it. We're not growing the government. No, we are growing the government. We're not growing the country. We are growing the government, but not the country. All in the name of people who are repulsed by it. And while they eat ribs, for us it's let them eat carrots. Only the Messiah and his family get to eat the ribs. Short rib, long back, baby back, whatever other kind of ribs they are. Actually, I am starting to wonder whether Obama's ideological hero is Karl Marx or Groucho Marx. It's an open question.